Gypsy Rose Blanchard, Melissa Moore, and Michele Matriciani, My Time to Stand. 2. Cajun, referring to Acadians, the French-speaking people who migrated to South Louisiana from Nova Scotia in the 18th century, and their descendants. My mama, Claudine Dee Blanchard, was all about her culture. She was a 100% born and bred French Cajun from a place called Golden Meadow in the great state of Louisiana. Golden Meadow is the southernmost incorporated area of Lafourche Parish, and you can list its local residents on the front and back of a sheet of loose-leaf paper. Mama loved Cajun cooking, which requires the holy trinity of ingredients: onions, bell peppers, and celery. Her birth surname was Peter, which means clown in French. Some people confuse it and pronounce it Petri, as in the Petri dish, on which penicillin was first discovered. You don't need to listen too hard to notice a distinct dialect among those of Cajun descent who live in southern Louisiana. My mother couldn't pronounce the teach sound, so when she said, "Give me that," it sounded like, "Give me dat." In fact, she H-dropped a lot. Shave off hair was shave off air. No matter how her words sounded, make no mistake, Claudine Blanchard always knew exactly what she was saying. I think when you love to tell stories like she did, you learn early on to choose your words and their delivery with precision, the better to ensnare the listener. My mother's first big lie, that I know of, was when she met my dad, Rod Blanchard, in 1990. Dad was 17 years old and already working as a trawler when he met my mom at the local bowling alley. I imagine my dad back in the day as a totally chill kid who got along with everyone, no matter what friend group he belonged to. He just wanted to have a good time, go see live bands, and didn't expect anything from anyone. Signing himself out of school early, my dad was a hard worker. Still is. At the bowling alley, my mother introduced herself to him, telling him she was 21. Like in one of those 80s movies, where some geeky freshman chases after the senior homecoming queen, Dad's boy brain thought he'd scored with an older woman, one who had her own ride a Ford Fiesta, and could legally buy him booze and be his designated driver. He just didn't know how much of an older woman she truly was. Mama was actually 23 years old. The question is, why would a woman in her 20s want an immature boy as a boyfriend? Knowing what I know now, I suspect she thought she could manipulate or control him in a way a man her age wouldn't allow. Or maybe her insecurity made her feel that a man her age wouldn't want her. She could have just thought Dad was hot. These things can all be true at the same time. So, they started dating. Mama driving Dad to Biloxi to bar hop, going out to see hair bands in the NOLA Club scene, frequenting the local dive bar hangout The Greenhouse. Mama was really into music. When she was younger, she used to follow bands around. She claimed she was in a relationship with Jack Russell, the lead singer of the 80s hair band Great White. I was recently told by a friend of Mama's that they were both outside a concert venue waiting for the band to come out of the tour bus. And my mother managed to get a picture taken with Jack, which she framed and hung on her bedroom wall. She told anyone who saw it that Jack had mailed the photo to her because they were in a relationship, which was completely false. Mama also claimed she was a virgin before she met my dad. I'm not about to ask my dad his opinion on this, but I know that being a groupie and a virgin cannot be true at the same time. According to stories I've heard, Mama had a thing for lead singers and wanted to be their girlfriend. Sometimes she sent flowers to herself and told people they were from various rock stars. With lies, she created lore. She was always telling stories. That was just Dee Dee. Was kneading together lies to bake a tasty story a learned behavior from her childhood? There are plenty of secrets in the Peter family that nobody talks about. I'm positive it's like that in most families. When you have a secret as big as the one my mother kept about her own father, Claude Pete, who could blame her? My mother was the baby of 6 children. And get this, of the 6, half were named after their father, Claude Jr., Claudia, and Claudine. Narcissist much? Dee Dee, as Mama was called, had dreams of being a somebody. She often made it a point to remind me that she could have been that somebody if she hadn't given it all up to take care of me. By the time my mother was 12, she had gained a lot of weight. According to her, she blew up, and she tried to wrap her middle in cellophane to sweat off the fat. I can't help but think her eating disorders coincided with her gaining womanly body fat after getting her first period, and with trying to purge the secret of what happened when my grandfather insisted on joining her during her baths. During her 11th and 12th grade years, Mama lost close to 200 pounds. Apparently, my grandmother Emma body-shamed Mama relentlessly, calling her fat. Mama began a very unhealthy diet and soon developed anorexia and bulimia. Her high school friend told me she remembers Mama eating only rice cakes for a whole year. Momsy Emma, as I called her, used to say her husband Claude was a man whore, claiming he had a wandering eye. I don't know if Emma knew what Claude was doing to Dee Dee. Back then, who knows? When Mama was younger, Momsy used to keep her home from school all the time, telling her she was sick when she really wasn't. My mother told me she used to drink vinegar to make her skin snow white, so she'd be more beautiful. And I guess it worked. In her senior year, in 1986, Mama was South Lafourche High School's ROTC queen. ROTC stands for Reserve Officers Training Corps. I never knew this track is for students who want to go to college to train to become an Army officer. How Mama loved to talk about this momentous event. She made it seem that after that crowning, she had been entered into pageants all around the state, except that wasn't true. I have come to find out that she attended pageants out of the obligation of being the 1986 ROTC queen. She had not been entered in any pageants after that. I feel sad for Mama now, for wanting me to believe that one pageant was so much more than what it was. I think it was the only time in her youth when she felt truly special and pretty. She would tell me the same stories of her glory days over and over again. How celebrities hit on her on Bourbon Street, or how musicians put her name in their songs and in the liner notes of their albums. More needing. Was she trying to get my adoration? My attention? Was she trying to make me jealous? I heard about how skinny she got, how pretty she got, and how people applauded her when she was a beauty queen. It almost seemed like she was trying to make me feel even smaller, in my wheelchair, with no teeth, malnourished, androgynous, with no attractiveness at all, most of the time dressed as a boy. I'd think, she used to have it all until I came along. I put her on a pedestal. I'd see pictures and think, wow, that was my Mama. No wonder Claude loved her most. Maybe I didn't follow in Mama's footsteps as a beauty queen, but when it came to Claude, I would turn out to be his favorite just like my mom had been. I don't know when Mama's dreams died, but by the time she met my father, she was drifting. She had tried. I remember her saying, "The rest of us kids were fuck-ups, so I tried to do my mom proud by joining junior ROTC and winning a beauty pageant." At the time, 23-year-old hospital worker Dee Dee approached my father in a bowling alley. She had never been in a serious relationship that I know of, had only completed 2 years of college, and wasn't in nursing school as she had intended. She blamed the lack of achievement on having me, but I think it's the other way around. She hadn't achieved much, so caring for a chronically sick kid became the excuse, or even the justification. See, Dee Dee isn't a fuck-up like the rest of those kids. Poor thing's got Gypsy. My grandmother, Sharon, my dad's mother, worked at the public library, and one day noticed a book in the return bin that had Mama's name on the checkout card in the back pocket. The title was something along the lines of How to Get Pregnant Fast. Concerned, Sharon called her son to warn him. If you know any 17-year-old boys, I don't need to tell you her warning fell on deaf ears. Instead, Dad confronted Mama, who became enraged that Sharon breached the confidentiality rules of the library. Next thing you know, Mama was trying to get Sharon fired. I know Mama had a taste for vengeance because I often witnessed it, so it makes sense that she jumped to such a vindictive act. You'd think she would have cared about the risk that her boyfriend's mother could end up hating her. Characteristically, my mother got very defensive and felt slighted by the smallest actions, even if they weren't done on purpose. She'd read into things, make assumptions about what people were thinking, take unrelated actions as personal affronts, and would shut them down in any way she could. Mama also ran away from situations and conflict a lot. Later in my life, I think she graduated from defensive to paranoid. This made it very difficult for her to have relationships, especially with her siblings. Her paranoia was partly why she isolated us from the world. Long story short, the pregnancy book worked because, well, here I am. In order to gather an understanding of my mother and my own birth story, I've had to endure some TMI moments with Dad and his wife of 30 years, Christy. The tale is as old as time. Rod wasn't in love with Dee Dee, but he was brought up with a sense of duty that told him he had to marry her. It was the right thing to do when you get a girl pregnant. They had sex 3 times in their entire relationship and didn't consummate their marriage. Dee Dee didn't fuss too much about that. Maybe she had gotten what she wanted out of Rod already. Because he was a minor, Dad needed his own mother's signature to consent to his marriage. The ceremony and reception were at the VFW in Golden Meadow, Louisiana, on December 27, 1990. On the way there, Dad and one of his groomsmen got in a wreck and totaled Mama's Ford Fiesta. Dad was arrested for driving without a license, and he used his phone call to ask Mama's parents, Claude and Emma, to bail him out so he could make it to the hall to marry their daughter. Once they all arrived at the altar, Dad didn't have the rings. In the middle of the ceremony, my dad's best man, Terry Jr., literally ran out of the FW and all the way back to Grandma Sharon's house to fetch the rings from the kitchen counter. After the wedding reception, Dad and Mama partied at the greenhouse, where Dad was chatting up his high school friends and old girlfriends, and did a shot at the bar with his best friend Christy, who worked at the same local hospital as Mama. Christy had been invited to the wedding but declined, saying she had other plans, a lie Christy was caught in awkwardly as Mama ran into her at the greenhouse. Dad looked handsome in his all-white tux, which had become playfully disheveled, with his shirt untucked and his tie unknotted. His mission: get drunk as a skunk. Which he did. Mission accomplished. Mama and Dad's wedding night was spent in Claude and Emma's house, in the upstairs bedroom, where they planned to live for a while. At the age of 17, my dad was already working as a full-time fisherman, trawling for shrimp. He had signed himself out of high school as soon as he legally could to follow his own father's footsteps in the family trade. Trawling is a type of commercial fishing that involves a boat pulling a weighted fishing net behind it through the water or on the seafloor to target certain fish and seafood species, including a Louisiana staple, shrimp. My dad worked on a shrimp boat with 20-foot nets that had mouths as large as Moby Dick's, swallowing up shrimp wherever they were hiding, in lakes, rivers, causeways, and the bayou. Trawling is hard work, especially when emptying the shrimp from the nets and putting them on ice and storing them. Dad would be gone for weeks at a time. Even today, his job as a boat captain requires him to work the boat for a month straight. At least once Mama had me, she'd have the help of her own mama while Dad was gone. Being away from home so much made it convenient for Dad to play around behind Mama's back. Seeing other women without getting caught is a lot easier when you aren't expected home, and Dad went a little overboard, no pun intended, with his affairs. Ultimately, he got caught when a young girl around the same age as my dad came around looking for Mama's help, or at least that's the story Mama told me. The girl wanted money from Mama for an abortion because Rod had gotten her pregnant. My mother, being Catholic, was not pro-choice, and said she wouldn't aid this stranger in getting an abortion. But she did have extra diapers and formula of mine that she'd give her to help. The other girl decided to have and keep the baby. And today I have a half-sister, almost the same age as me, who doesn't live too far away. She seems like a really great girl, raised by her mama and stepdad, whom she considers her father. She reached out to me once when I was in prison. She was gracious and kind to me, and I only wish her the very best and only happiness. Sorry, it's hard not to digress in my storytelling, as the more I investigate, the more the twists and turns of my colorful family unwind. With the other woman out of the picture, Dad and Mama were still having a bit of a sex problem, in that they hadn't officially consummated their marriage. And with Dad away so much and seeing other women, the last time they'd had sex was when I was conceived. My dad went back and forth on how to leave Mama, starting almost immediately after the wedding. For almost 3 months, Rod called Christy, asking for advice for a way out of the marriage. Over and over again, he said to her, "I want to leave Dee Dee, but I don't know what to tell her. Tell her the truth. Tell her how you feel. was Christy's answer. Rod even went to Christy's mom for help, since she'd watched him grow up. Finally, on the morning of his 18th birthday, March 25, 1991, my dad packed his things while Mama slept. "What you think you're doing?" she asked when the rustling awakened her, pulling the blankets off and sitting up. "Dee Dee, I'm leaving." "I don't love you." "This is wrong, and I did this for the wrong reasons." Without words, Mama popped up from her bed, ripped the framed marriage license off the wall, and threw it across the room. I don't think this is when my mother's man-hating began. I think she always hated them. "Men might be nice to look at," she'd say, "but they'll betray you in a heartbeat. Better to just stay away from them all." So I did, until I didn't.